The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty God, we thank you for the freedoms that we enjoy in our country. We thank you for the freedom to worship as we please and for the freedom to have voice in the way that we are governed. We thank you for those who have committed themselves to public service and ask a special blessing on them today. Guide our hearts and our minds that we might feel you in our presence and that we might be guided to do your work in the world. In Jesus' name. Amen. Well, a special welcome to everyone today, especially those who are visiting with us and not regularly at Holy Communion. My name is Sandy Webb, and it is the great pleasure of my professional life to be the rector of this parish church. We are moving through an observation in the Rector's Forum of the 50th anniversary of the martyrdom of Dr. King in Memphis in 1968. Our installment today is with Mayor Jim Strickland, and who will be introduced in just a second, but we're carrying on this conversation all the way through April. So please do make sure to get a schedule of events and speakers so that we can continue this conversation as we look backwards to what has happened and also as we look forwards to what God will be doing in our midst in the years ahead. Our guest today is Mayor Jim Strickland, and it's a privilege to invite parishioner Julie Ellis to introduce the mayor.
Well, it's a personal privilege for me to introduce my friend, Jim Strickland. Thank you, Sandy and Jane, for asking me to do this. As Sandy just said, we at Holy See are appropriately focusing on community and shared service, as well as revisiting and learning, or maybe relearning, the events surrounding the death of Martin Luther King. It is timely for us to hear today from the man who leads our city in the still challenging times. As Reverend King wrote in his book, Strength to Love, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort or convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. To say that our mayor has been challenged from the day he was sworn in is really an understatement of the work and the controversies that face Jim. But as he has always done, he has not shied away from addressing publicly what is needed in our city. Before he was even sworn in, he convened the largest group of citizens ever assembled to study and guide him on his transition to set the stage for what he needed to accomplish in his first 4 years of service. He pledged new eyes to solve old problems. And boy, did he face old and big problems. A 911 system failing many citizens. Businesses and residents leaving our city with their taxes. Frustrated minority and women-owned businesses that had been ignored for years, and a police force that was dwindling and crime rising. But in partnership with the hard work of city employees, Jim has solved much, and I know he's going to share some of those, as I will. Reverend King described leadership when he stated, "A genuine leader is not a searcher for consensus, but a molder for consensus." In a new spirit of collaboration, Jim, who served on our city council, representing our district from 2007 to 2015, District 5, and he ultimately achieved the chairmanship of the city council, reached out to the 13 men and women on the city council, who I affectionately call our 13 characters, to pass 2 budgets on time, achieve the largest police recruit classes in years who have joined the force, and with his outstanding administration committed to a philosophy that government must be brilliant at the basics for our citizens, which means core services such as paving streets, answering and fixing complaints, and addressing the needs of all of our citizens. Jim has lived up to his promise of being transparent and communicative. And if you don't get his weekly email, please see me. I'll tell you how to do it, or Jane will, because it is something you need to read every week. He tells you exactly what is happening and what he worries about and what he is championing. Reverend King once also said, "Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right?" And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but one must take it because it is right. Jim's vision for Memphis is to reverse our significant population loss through a strategy that reinvests in our city's core and its neighborhood and returns a more robust quality of life with jobs. This vision and his actions have changed a long-held politic view that Memphis should grow outward. The mayor has had to sever policies that were long in place, making him pretty unpopular to developers outside the city limits, and he has had to address the issue of de-annexation and areas of our community that are unhappy with city services. He's addressing homelessness. He's initiated programs that enable families to buy homes inside the city core, and he has been relentless in fighting blight and abandoned property, which is the #1 public nuisance impacting reinvestment. Jim is addressing what happens to our riverfront, our fairgrounds, our mud island, our parks, and he is concerned with all of our children, how we can improve the lives of all of our citizens. He is no longer a stranger to state government, which many of our former mayors have been, and he is thoughtfully addressing our aquifer, our river preservation, and the myriad energy and environmental issues that pose hurdles to our scarce financial resources. He's not deciding these major issues by applying the safe, politic, or popular measurements. Instead, he is driven to decide all these issues thoughtfully, adhering to the guiding principle, is it right? Jim graduated from Christian Brothers High School in 1982. He is a twice graduate of the University of Memphis, both undergrad and law. He practiced law at Glankler Brown and then collaborated with our own U.S. Representative David Kustoff for 17 years. He has a beautiful wife, Melanie, 2 amazing children, and wonderful parents who support him personally. And he has been committed to community service all of his life. And his major goal, achieve transparency, fairness, and a safe and vibrant city. Memphis will be in the spotlight of the world as many come to witness firsthand how we remember and honor the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's death this April. The world will be watching our city and all of us. May each of us understand, embrace, and truly believe what Jim is trying to stand for. I am Memphis. Reverend King's well-known prayer is no doubt the prayer of our own mayor, which asks, "Use me, God. Show me how to take who I am, who I want to be, and what I can do, and use it for a purpose greater than myself." Memphis is at a wonderful time in its history. It's a city about to turn 200 years old. We have a new resurgence of collegiality and collaboration. We have a pride that's returning and has been dusted off and is shining again. And we have a mayor who is a leader. He's a consensus molder. He is measured by his stances in times of challenge and controversy. He decides issues on what is right, and who I have no doubt is being guided by God Almighty as he strives to serve all of the citizens of Memphis. Please help me welcome our mayor, Jim Strickland.
Julie, we know now, and we have known for some time, how it is you've risen to the heights you've risen. That was such complete research on Jim's work.
I have to have good material.
Well, Mayor, as you know, we've been looking at the issues surrounding Martin Luther King and his legacy in Memphis and in the nation and in the world in our forum. Last week we had... the mayor's a little disappointed that he's here today after last week. He says that they were eloquent. Mm-hmm. They were magnificent, and I think their courage touched us all. So when we were talking about having you come and visit, it was last fall, and a lot has happened since last fall in your public service. But what we were thinking about last fall is the work that you have done to get a one-time pension for the sanitation workers who were on the job in 1968. In 1968, when the sanitation workers settled with the city, they chose to take Social Security instead of a city pension, in part because they were afraid the city would be able to take their pension away. So they took Social Security. Jim, will you tell us about the one-time pension fund, how it came to be, what it's going to cost, and...
Sure. And just to reemphasize this, when they chose Social Security, that's all they get. There's no 401k component to it. So it's only Social Security. And I don't know which 4 sanitation workers you had talking to you, but we have 2 or 3 of the men who were working in 1968 still working. I don't know if Mr. Nickelberry was here.
Nickelberry was not here, but Cleo Smith was.
Okay, Mr. Smith was here. So they're still working. And part of it is, I'm sure they said this, they love their job. They love serving people. In fact, a couple guys who had retired, who were still working in 68, said, if my knees could take it, I would still be working. So they partly love their job, but partly also they cannot afford to retire. And since 68, other mayors have, particularly Mayor Harrington, added a supplement to the retirement system. But they're still, if you compare it to other city workers and sanitation workers, they're still below. So we thought when we took office, we got to fix this somehow. And so I talked to our Chief of Human Resources, Alex Smith, who is new to Memphis and just a dynamo person. And she got together some people, and we actually got together a couple ministers, Lucinda Gray, and my mind just froze on the other one, and he's actually since passed away.
Oh,
yes, Dwight Montgomery. Mm-hmm. And then we got our pension experts. So basically, it's a 2-part solution, one part that you talk about. And we got with the city council, and we gave a one-time, turned out to be $70,000 grant to the surviving strikers from 68. There's roughly 25 of them, 2 or 3 of them still working. And we've paid those out. And obviously there's no amount of money. I know you're having speakers later on who will talk about the details of the 68 strike, but those men were not treated well. And but I won't go into all that, but they were not treated well. There's no amount of money that can really compensate them for that, so, but we came up with some figure. And then in addition to that, the second part is kind of overlooked. We added another supplemental plan, and I have to always convert things to things I can understand. It's like a 401k, but for government you can't have a 401k. And there are probably people in this room who know much more than I do, but we'll put in a little money and they can put in a little money. And with that system, for all the sanitation workers that are currently working and all the future ones, they will have the opportunity to have a retirement plan equal to other city workers. So we thought that was very important too. And so I just kicked off the ball and other people ran it down the field. So
it is true that some of the men we saw last week then really felt that they could not afford to retire?
Yes. They don't want to necessarily say that, but yes. And it is twofold. They do love their job, but also that I mean, think about it. Only Social Security. Mm-hmm. That's all you get in retirement. Mm-hmm. It's not very much money.
Yeah. So I want to ask you this, Mayor. Of course, a number of the original men have died now, but their widows remain.
Right.
What was the process for not including them? And I'm sure it was financial, but what was the conversation like around the table?
Yeah, we had to cut it off somewhere, and then you go widows, you go children, and so forth. And we just thought financially, number one, that we could only afford that for 25 people instead of potentially 200. Yeah. And just thought it was fair that those are the men who struck. And I say men because it was only men in 68. Those are the men who struck, and they put their careers on the line, and they did that. And I'm not saying their spouses didn't live through that, because some of them did, but we just thought that that was the best place to draw the line.
And how much, I understand it's coming out of the reserve, about 1.1 million?
Yes.
What are we having to give up to provide this?
Our reserves or rainy day fund is about $95 million, give or take. We'd like to have it about 110, but the 95 is better than we've been in probably a dozen years. So taking $1.5 million or so out of that is, we thought we could handle that. And we add to our reserves every single year.
Did you hear from other mayors around the nation about this? And I have to say, I was telling you before we started, I saw it when I was at the airport one day, a headline saying that the sanitation workers were going to get a pension. It seemed to me to be groundbreaking because this has been their pain since 1968, was
Right.
that they really settled pretty low.
Yeah. If a lot of effort's gone on for a lot of years to try to figure out how to make it better, and even to the point of trying to say, can they get out of Social Security and go into the city's retirement plan? But they cannot. Federal law prohibits that, so they could not have done that. Congressmen have looked at it, mayors have looked at it, and we just put together a team of people who are experts who deal with pensions and retirement systems, our HR chief, and then some of these ministers who knew the emotions of 68 and knew what fair was, and that group came up with what I think is a really good plan. Now, I have not heard from any other mayors, but I follow a handful of mayors on their Twitter accounts and do research on them. And when I want to copy things from them, it's not like I call them. They don't have it copyrighted, so I have to call them and get permission. We copied verbatim what the Albuquerque mayor did on a homeless panhandler issue. Copied it verbatim from what they did, and but I actually saw him in a mayor's conference and told him, but I didn't call him.
And what was the city council's reaction? We know the city council approved it. Did you get any pushback?
No, there was no pushback. In fact, we originally proposed $50,000 grants, and they upped it to $70,000. No, it was all unanimous excitement, and felt it was the right thing to do.
And do the two that are still on the job, do they have to retire before they get the money?
No.
They've been paid?
They've been paid. They've been paid. And I don't know if Mr. Nickelberry told me he is thinking about it.
Retiring?
You're thinking about retiring.
We didn't get the impression that Reverend Cleo Smith is going to retire.
They're just amazing. It's the best word I can think of to describe them. They're out there every single day. I forgot where Mr. Smith works, but Mr. Nickelberry works on the downtown area.
Well, it was really very poignant to listen to them describe what it was like on February 1st, 1968. Of course, they heard the news about the two men being crushed, and they said that they were forced to continue working. They could not stop work. Right. So I think that a lot of us began to understand things in a different way after hearing them speak. Can you tell us about the city's preparation for MLK 50 and this has been going on some time, I imagine largely under your tenure?
Yeah, as soon as we got elected, we realized that MLK 50, I got sworn in January 1 of 2016. We knew 2 years down the road, and those 2 years have flown by the way. So we said we got to start planning for it, and then Julie mentioned in 2019, we celebrate the city's bicentennial, and those plans are moving forward. It is organized chaos, the MLK 50 celebration. And I say that because there are many groups planning something, some of which I don't think we know about. But the National Civil Rights Museum's got plans. The Kojic denomination has things planned. The city of Memphis has things planned. Some of them overlap, and some of them are our own things. Ursula Madden, who used to be on Channel 5, I believe her daughter goes to St. Mary's. And I see some shakes ahead, yes. She's our chief of communications. She's in charge of the cities, and then she works with these other groups. What we're doing is we have a reverse march. With this, it probably came out last week.
It did, yeah.
It did?
They talked about the reverse march.
Okay. But they would organize at Claiborne Temple, which is right next to FedEx Forum, what until a year or two ago was that rotting church that you'd see next to FedEx Forum. And thankfully some folks have come in there, bought it, and stabilized it. But they would organize there, have meetings there, and start their marches to City Hall there. The reverse march is going to go from City Hall to Claiborne Temple. And the sanitation workers are involved, children are involved, hopefully the entire community is involved. We're also having an awards dinner for the 68 sanitation workers. We will also honor all current garbage workers, but we will honor the 68 ones. And then we're building 2 parks, monuments. I Am a Man Plaza, which is right next to Claiborne Temple. There is not a monument in honor of those men, and it's in the vacant lot right next to it. In fact, we've started work, and they promised it'll be done by April 4th. And then, and that money has mostly come from the Plow Foundation, which you may or may not know, Mr. Plow, after Dr. King's assassination, the strike was settled. Mr. Plow actually went into his own pocket and paid for some of the money that helped settle the strike. And so there's going to be a little plaque for him, and that's why they were interested. And then a little west of there, behind the MLG&W headquarters, is going to be the MLK Reflection Park, where it's got water features. And then many years ago, I think in the 70s, there was they called it a mountaintop sculpture that if anybody knows where it is right now, I'll buy them a water. But it's on Main Street near the Federal Reserve, but it's kind of tucked in there, and only skateboarders know where it is, really. That's going to be moved down to the Reflection Park, and we've gotten many companies who are donating there, and one big one that I'm not at liberty to announce who's going to do that, but they say that's going to be done by April 4th. So we wanted to do some significant things that would last, but also honor the sanitation workers, but do a handful of things and do them well. Now, I'm more familiar with what the Church of God in Christ is doing. They're actually having they're going to reenact the mountaintop speech, which Dr. King gave the night before he was assassinated. And they're thinking about doing it. Somehow that's tied into Mason Temple, which is, I don't know, a mile, probably maybe 2 miles from Claiborne Temple, which is where he gave the speech. And but they're expecting tens of thousands of people. I believe they've invited all the living presence. Who knows who's going to come?
Kojic has done this?
Kojic has done this. I believe they have. So we'll see who's going to come, but I think there's going to be a large presence. All city offices are involved, public works, police, and everything will be safe and well run. Traffic may be difficult, but we'll get through it. So, and then the Civil Rights Museum is having events, many of which are more academic and discussion oriented, kind of like this. And I'm sure there are other groups doing things. Because I'm Catholic, I know the Catholic Church is doing a couple things. One at the Cannon Center, a presentation of a play. So there's countless things going to go on.
Well, we expect that there will be a huge press presence too, both national and international.
Yeah. Oh, I think we will be, we will be the subject to a lot of coverage come April.
So we know from news accounts that Mayor Jim Strickland had some things in his heart that he wanted done before this happened, and this brings
Right.
us to the statue
Sure.
removal. Do you want to take a minute just to tell people your side of that story?
Sure. To me, statues are reserved for people that we hold up. I mean, literally the term put someone on a pedestal comes from a statue. In St. Louis, that is, they do their baseball players, Stan Musial. There's a statue of Stan Musial. There's not a statue of Martha Thornberry. They put a statue for somebody they hold up. Historical markers are what mark history, those little markers that we have. Statues, to me, are reserved for people that we idolize and want to look up to. In Memphis today, the majority, not 100%, the majority of people in Memphis don't look up to the Confederates that we took the statues down for. I wanted to honor the state law. There's a state law, there's probably only about 3 states who have a state law that says to move an historical statue, you have to get permission from the State Historical Commission. I wanted to honor that process. We applied for it, and they denied it in October. There was also another petition that we filed saying that because of the timing of the law, it didn't really apply to us, and that was still alive. They did not deny that. They sent it to a judge and said that would be decided in November. They also said, we want to send y'all to mediation, which is like a settlement conference, and y'all do that on December 1. Both the hearing with the judge and the mediation got pushed off to January, February, and March. And in the back of our mind, we also knew that there was another legal solution, which was the law only forbids cities or governments, city, county, state, from moving it. It does not prevent a private owner from moving a statue. So we knew that that was another.
Jim, this is something that you had seized on some
Yeah.
time ago, right? As a council member, you...
Yeah. When the original law was passed about 5 years ago, I was on the city council, and they gave me Alan Wade, our attorney, handed us the law. And at that time, the law was only about this long. It's been amended like 4 times since then. They went from, as one example, they went from a majority vote of the Tennessee Historical Commission to a 2/3 vote of the Historical Commission. And so I read it and said, the city government cannot do this, cannot do this, cannot do this. And, we'd get people say, well, why don't you build a wall around it? Well, the law said you couldn't do that. Why couldn't you just plant bushes around it and let the bushes grow? The law says you can't do that. The city cannot do that. But it never said the city could not sell the property. But my preference was not to do that, and was to get permission.
Not to sell the property?
Not to sell the property and get permission. And I told the Historical Commission that we have honored and abided by this law. We'd like you to honor our wishes in the city of Memphis. And they voted overwhelmingly not to do that. And then when these other things got delayed into March, April, January, February, March, it became clear that they were not going to be down by April 4th.
And why is that so important to you?
Well, I thought with the eyes of the world on it, well, first of all, we needed a deadline. This whole process has been going on since I was on the council.
Right. I mean, through 2 previous administrations, really.
Correct. And through 2 rounds of hearings in front of the Historical Commission. And they only meet 3 times a year. We needed a deadline, and April 4th I thought was a fair deadline and a good deadline because the eyes of the world are going to be on Memphis. And so we just set that deadline. And when it became obvious that that deadline was not going to be met, We had our internal lawyers and 2 outside law firms look at this issue, and they said it was legal to sell it, and that's what we did. And I'd like to touch on a couple of the common criticisms of it. We sold the parks for $1,000 each. I'll sell anyone in this room Overton Park for $1,000 today. Now you have to promise to maintain it. Parks are money pits. Parks do not make money. Shelby Farms, which is a great park, probably has an annual budget of, I bet, $1 million. Overton Park had fallen in disrepair so much that we contracted out with a nonprofit to run it. And they're putting hundreds of thousands of dollars into a park. But you got to have insurance and cut the grass and trim the trees. And then if you want to program it with playground equipment and all that. So it's not like, and the nonprofit that bought this park cannot build condos on those parks. They're not going to make money. They are going to lose money. In fact, they've already lost money. So that, to me, that argument does not hold water, that somehow we got snookered. And it is a real sale. We are not taking back those parks.
What about the people who say it was an illegal sale and the people were not consulted?
There's nothing in the law that says we have to broadcast that we're going to sell property. We sell property in our city council all the time. You covered city council a little bit, so you know it. So we cover it all the time. And we did pass an ordinance in September that allowed us to sell property to a nonprofit at less than fair market value. It's just nobody in the media covered it.
Uh-huh. I see.
And it takes 3 readings. So it takes 3 different meetings, and that was on the agenda.
Was this sort of foreshadowing what was going to happen?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we were preparing for the possible blockage on the...
Can you tell us where you were that night, Jim? And
I was at City Hall, and we had prepared for it, obviously.
how long were you preparing? I mean, the police coverage and...
Well, in mid to late November, when the hearing in front of the judge and the mediation, it was clear that those were going to be postponed. So late November, early December, it said, we got to do this. So you have to arrange a lot, you have to arrange the sale, and then the nonprofit had arranged for the company to do it. And then we had to arrange
Cranes and
all that kind of stuff. And then the police had to arrange what their number one concern is safety. And they wanted, frankly, the police wanted to do it at midnight because the fewer people. The workers said that, they've been working a full day and they don't want to, be operating cranes on after 24 hours of work. So we decided to do it after rush hour traffic to get everyone out of downtown. And that's one thing that people forget is that there are a couple of reasons it had to move like this. And one is public safety. You don't want to say 2 weeks from now, everyone, we're going to take down these statues, because you saw, 3 or 4 weeks ago, groups from out of town were coming into the city and protesting. That would have been multiplied like Charlottesville.
Mm-hmm. And did you hear from other mayors the next morning?
No. That night, after the vote was taken, I had a list of state officials to call, starting with the governor, just to give them a heads up on what we were doing.
And what did Haslam say?
Well, I don't really like to say what other officials tell me on the phone, good or bad, because Governor Haslam supported our waiver process. Mm-hmm. He supported us in front of the Tennessee Historical Commission doing it.
Did he make the bulk of the appointments to the Tennessee Historical Commission, or was it previous?
No, he made the bulk, but legislators made recommendations.
Uh-huh.
So I went through Lieutenant Governor, Speaker of the House, state reps, state senators, and made just to let them know what was going on, and then we waited.
Well, it was I think in many respects, it was one of the biggest things that happened this year. And for people who didn't see it happening, you heard about it the next morning. It just seemed unbelievable that it had finally happened. I mean, let's remember the process that had happened. A previous council had renamed the parks, hoping that that would dissipate some of the anger and angst about it. And it really has been a simmering issue for 8 or 10 years.
Oh, probably longer than that, decades. I believe in my heart of hearts it was the absolute right thing to do. And I know in my heart that there's people out maybe in this room who do not agree with me, but I think it's the right thing to do. But it didn't, as I said that night, it does not dissipate all the challenges that Memphis has. And we still got poverty, we still have crime, we still have poor education, and we need to get on those. And we will continue to do that. So,
Mayor, I think if people heard the news accounts, they know that you and your family were the recipients of just a tremendous amount of negative outpouring about this, including, I hate to say, even death threats. Can you tell us what that's like?
I try to convince my family. I don't read social media, and I recommend everyone not read social media. Because the Facebook warriors out there, many of the Facebook warriors out there love to post things and their ire, but they don't lift a finger to solve the challenges that we have. Not one. And so I don't read the comments. Now, I can't say the same thing for my wife and my 16-year-old son. So even though I tell them over and over and over, do not read that stuff. So it's really tough on them. But, you know, you dial back the clock a year from that, I had protesters in my yard looking in through my windows. These were the bridge protesters, or an offshoot of the bridge protesters. And so I'm not going to say that's fun, but it is what it is, and I just do the best I can. I'm an average guy who was blessed with a good education by my parents and a good work ethic. But I'm an average person, and I'm just doing the best I can. And if protesters on the left or right don't think I'm doing a good job and they vote me out of office, to heck with it. But I love this job every single day. I'm excited about the momentum we have and the great things that we're doing on one hand, but the challenges we have excite me too, and that we got to overcome them. And these are decades-long challenges, and we have a great team at City Hall, and I think we're making progress. But my life, the success of my life is not going to rise and fall on my reelection.
I just wanted to say that there was so much negative outpouring about the statues coming down from, I think, a quarter inside the city and, of course, outside the city, that the city's Facebook rating dropped from 4 or 5 to 2.1 almost overnight. And then there was a campaign inside the city to post positive reflections of the city, so it went way back up. But that's the people have power now in this social media age, and that's pretty telling that you can marshal a force like that to plunge a city into a 2.1 rating.
Right.
Jim, can you tell us where the case is now? We know there's a lawsuit. Are you still considering mediation?
Yeah, in fact, the judge ordered us mediation, which we think is great. We'll do it next week. I mean, we would jump on it. I think the nonprofit Green Spaces said they'll do it. And the Sons of Confederates, I think, well, they have to do it now. The court order says they have to do it. So the lawyers were talking even Thursday and Friday about what mediator, where it will be, and I think in the next 30 days you'll see a mediation. And I've been hopeful this whole time that there would be a win-win out of this, that there are places in Tennessee who want the statue. There's a Nathan Bedford Forrest State Park up near Camden. They've expressed an interest. There's other places who wanted the statue. So to me, it's a win-win that the statues could be moved in a place where most of the population wants it. and the city of Memphis gets a mood where most of the people did not want it.
What are you going to try to accomplish in mediation? Is one side still wanting to put them back up?
Well, mediation, as the lawyers in the room will say, who knows what the first thoughts are from the parties. I'm sure the Sons of Confederates are going to say, we want them up. Our position, the nonprofit, is going to be, they're down. Where do you want us to move them?
It certainly has changed the discussion.
Yes. For instance, in the, I think the Sons of Confederates will be more open to moving them somewhere because under the law, a private owner does not have to maintain the statues. Now, the court order said for the time being, you can't do anything with them. But in theory, they wouldn't have to put them up anywhere. So before, in December, the Sons of Confederates said, yeah, we'll go to mediation, but we're not agreeing to anything. I think this opened up the possibility of a good settlement.
Do you happen to know how much it's cost the city to provide police presence at the park?
I don't know.
We see an officer,
Still?
not still, but...
Oh, okay. I think when the statues were there, what our position was, especially after Charlottesville, which was in August or something, that those statues are a flashpoint for potential violence. And so we put a police officer there and a camera. And it's so funny, you can't please everyone. People on the far left were hammering us every day, why are you guarding statues? Why are you guarding statues? Well, we weren't guarding statues. We were trying to prevent a flashpoint of violence. And we were successful. And so it goes in the category you can't please everyone.
Well, you certainly couldn't please either side on this. I mean,
Right.
there were some people who were furious at you because it wasn't happening fast enough.
Right.
And then the other side was dang mad that it happened at all.
Right.
So we'll pay attention to the mediation. And I now want you to talk about these Brilliant at the Basics. And one of the latest things has been this reduction in the 9/11 response call time. Will you talk about the new center? Is that the reason the times have dropped so much?
Well, let me start. What we do is we strive to be brilliant at the basics. I know we're human beings and we're never going to be perfect, but we need to strive to better serve you. And there were many things that weren't doing well. And I promised during the election we would measure results and hold people accountable. So we measured. When I took office, the average wait time for a 911 call, when you dial the second one and the time we answer the phone, that average wait time was 57.9 seconds, basically a minute. The average wait time.
Between when you called and someone answered?
Yes. That's not even in response to the call. That's just how long it takes to get an answer. And that's unacceptable. So we improved the training, put somebody in charge who really knows, and then measured results. And I always say that we all do better when we measure results, even ourselves, when we hold ourselves accountable. When you put the results up there and say, oh my goodness, it's not as good as we think it's going to be. So I think that I hired better people to be in charge and filled some vacancies and improved the training. And we've gotten the average wait time down to about 8 seconds. And in fact, I had to use it the other night. My wife is diabetic and her blood sugar plummeted to a point where I shouldn't tell this. My wife would probably not be happy I did that.
Did you get a good response time? That's important.
I did. Yes, ma'am.
And how long before an ambulance arrives? Is somebody working on that?
For an emergency, our standard is less than 5 minutes, and we've met that standard. Fire department has, for decades, Memphis has had a really good fire department, and we're maintaining that standard. And then what we do now is we actually give you that information. If you're on my email list, you've been getting the results for months now. But we've also created a part of our website that you can go on there any time of day, any day of the week, and see how we're doing in many different, how long it takes us to fill potholes, pick up a missed garbage collection. We pick up, the sanitation workers could have told you this, 99.5% of garbage cans are picked up on time. It's that 0.5% that we miss. Then we measure how long it takes us to cure those issues. We've had some successes like 911, and then we have things that we're not doing very well on. So we just got to keep improving.
Can you give us an update on where we are now in filling these hundreds of openings on the police force? And
Yeah. I've had 3 questions while I came in. What are we doing about crime? And we only have 10 more minutes, so.
and we have promised the people are going to have a time to ask you questions. Why don't this be my last question for you,
All right.
and then we'll let.
If you only remember 2 things out of this talk, I hope you remember there is a crime plan and we're working it. I can't go through it all, but there's 5 big points. Number 1 is the thing that we've worked on the most, and that's hire more police officers. 6 years ago, we had 2,452. 2,452, 6 years ago. We dipped down last year to almost 1,900. So we're back over 2,000, but just say we're 2,000. So we're 400 to 500 officers short of where we were.
And Mayor, it's part of the dip because the pay in neighboring cities our size was better?
Well, there's a million reasons for it. The number 1 reason is that for the 4 years before I was mayor, we just didn't hire many police officers. We hired more officers in my first 2 years and 15 days than the 4 years before me combined. Any organization has natural attrition, people retiring, people leaving. We'd have an average of 100 officers leave every year through various things.
And sometimes other cities come here and set up.
And they poach our officers. So that number of 100 had risen to 185 before we got to be mayor for a lot of reasons. We can go into details if you want. We've gotten that number down to about 130. We want to get it back down to closer to 100, and then hire more police officers. We got to drive down the attrition and drive up the hiring. And we want to have 2,300 officers by 2020. That's our goal. Because officers cannot eliminate crime, but they sure can reduce it. And we have, in Memphis, we've shown it. The more officers we have, violent crime goes down. When we lose officers, crime goes up. Every city from New York across the country has shown the more officers you have. So it's the number 1 thing we work on. It is hard because it's hard to be a police officer nowadays. Other cities are struggling to hire them too. We're, just so y'all know, we're advertising in our city. We've had 2 classes where we've graduated roughly 85 officers, which is the most we've graduated in maybe a decade per class. We have 2 classes a year. We'll have another one start in March. We want to get even more officers through that, and we're going to other cities to try to poach their officers. So we're doing everything we can to do it. It's the most important thing we've got going. It just takes so much longer than I want to do it. I want it to happen.
And we can afford a full complement?
We will be able to afford 2,300. And we're also doing a study on how many officers we really need. We know it's more than 2,000, but I don't know if it's 24, 25, 2,800. The International Association of Chiefs of Police are doing the study for us and really tell us exactly how many officers we need.
Okay, I'm going to open up the floor now. So if any questions, we'll call on you. And if you want to stand and say your question, the mayor will respond.
Yes, ma'am.
See?
Are you expecting any additional help during the Martin Luther King celebration from outside? Are you expecting any riots or what are you expecting?
Jim, I'm going to repeat the question so we get on the microphone. So the question is, are you going to put on some more people? Are you expecting riots? What's on your radar?
Our police director would say he's expecting the worst. I don't expect that, but he's planning for it. My guess is that during several days around April 4th that our officers will have no days off and they'll be working a lot of overtime just to maintain the peace. Even if there's no protesters up to no good, we'll have a massive amount of people and we got to handle that. So he'll be prepared for it. And they do, for the most part, protesters give you advance notice on the internet, and they Facebook each other, and I'm talking about the far left and far right. They do this, so you usually have advance notice. Yes,
Next
ma'am.
question. The question is, what are the other 4 things the mayor is doing to fight crime besides hiring police officers?
Real quick. Number 2, we need stiffer penalties for violent criminals. On Christmas Day, police arrested a very aggressive and violent carjacker. His past record was as long as my arm. For violent criminals, they need to serve more time in jail. 3, the true long-term solution to crime is young people picking the right path and not the wrong path. Some of us were talking about that earlier. There are great groups that do help, like the Boys and Girls Club, Memphis Athletic Ministry, Streets Ministries, all these churches and so forth. We have libraries and community centers that help hundreds of thousands of kids, but we got to help tens of thousands of kids. So we got to give kids something productive to do when they're not in school. And we're doing more in the city, and we're working with the nonprofits. And I could go on more, but I won't. 4, jobs. Somebody has a job is less likely to create crime. But this is where I flip the argument on the head. Memphis is an opportunity city. There are 15,000 jobs in the Memphis area right now that are open that cannot be filled, mostly because people don't have the skills. And thanks to Governor Haslam and the state legislature, they have made community college and tech school free. I'll give you one example. We have 2 tech schools in Memphis called Tennessee College of Applied Technology. They're building a 3rd in Bartlett. Their best program is airplane mechanic. You can go learn to be an airplane mechanic. We have a little company in Memphis called FedEx. They hire airplane mechanics. Your starting salary is $56,000 a year. Your second year, you're making $72,000 a year. And you got to go to school for a year and a half to get a certificate. Again, it's free, and then that's there. That's opportunity galore. So when Governor Haslam was in town saying, signing the bill making community college tech school free, he said, we need evangelists out there. Well, this is an appropriate crowd. I'm going to ordain all of you evangelists. You need to go out and spread the good news that there are opportunities out there that people don't know about. So if they don't know about them, they don't exist. So we got to tell young people that these opportunities are out there. 15,000 jobs, free workforce. 5th thing, when people have a criminal record and they've turned their lives around and wanted a second chance, they deserve a second chance. We need to give it to them. We've worked with the county on the Office of Reentry. We go into jails, help counsel people, give them workforce training before they're released. And then we also help people expunge their criminal records. You can expunge your records if it's a nonviolent offense. You hadn't been arrested in 5 years. Amy Wyrick, the DA, told me they couldn't afford the $400 court cost. So I went out and raised, some of you in this room gave, $60,000. We've helped 100 people expunge their records, and we have more money left over. So I am optimistic that if we do all 5 of these things, and at the same time the schools have to improve the schools, we can do all these things, we will get long-term reduction in crime. Other cities have shown it. Memphis showed it for a while when we had the officers. We will get it done.
Next question. Mr. Brazil?
What are the big causes behind this endless cycle of poverty in Memphis, and what do you think are the primary things we can do to address that?
What are the big causes of the endless cycle of poverty, and what can we do?
First of all, if it was easy, I think somebody in the last 100 years would have solved it. But I think we got to improve education. And I'll give you one key thing if we could do. I think this city, individuals in poverty would be benefited, and the whole city would be benefited. To increase the percent of our young people who can read at 3rd grade level in 3rd grade. Right now, 32% of our 3rd graders can read at 3rd grade level. Now, 6 years ago, it was 27%, so we're doing better, but that's pretty bad. A third grader who can read at third grade level has a 90% chance of graduating high school, even if they grow up in poverty. 90% chance of graduating high school, even if they grow up in poverty. And if you graduate high school, your chances of getting out of poverty are like twice as much as they were before. We got to think how great Memphis would be if 80% of third graders could read at third grade level. Now, there's a longer answer to that, but there is actually a plan to get that done.
And we're doing something about that at Holy Communion through Team Read. But
Team Read.
I think we've got one final question right.
You sold the parks to a nonprofit. Why did you choose to sell it to a nonprofit that was made a couple weeks ago, whereas selling it to like one that's been vetted and has history?
The question is about the sale of the city parks to a new nonprofit, not a vested one.
Because none of the current ones wanted to be involved in this, bottom line. Because they knew the controversy that would exist, and they, in their mind, they have all these other great works, Overton Park Conservancy. And I'm just saying, I'm not calling out any nonprofit who said no, but just think about it. The Shelby Farms Conservancy, Overton Park Conservancy, Civil Rights Museum, they have all this other great work, and they knew that there would be pushback, so they just didn't want any part of it. There's a group in the Midtown, or the Medical Center Collaborative, trying to build up the medical center issue. The Civil Rights Museum, this has made the news, actually wrote us a letter saying, we know you're looking, don't even come knocking on our door.
That's all the time we have. Sandy is pacing in the back. A reprieve. Charlton?
As a congregation, talking about education, particularly for young children, second, third graders, what can we do as a congregation to help to support that?
What y'all could do to help education, Jane just mentioned it. Apparently y'all already participate in Team Read. Team Read is a great program. It was in part started by Donna Gaines, pastor at Bellevue's wife. She's got a similar program, but it's the same thing as Team Read, where you go into the second grade and you volunteer and you spend an hour a week helping second graders learn to read in preparation for third grade. My wife has actually volunteered. And if you talk to the Team Read people, and y'all apparently all have a team here, the scores in those schools with Team Read are off the charts. They have improved dramatically, and it takes 1 hour a week. Sunday school classes do it together, individuals do it together by themselves. It's a really good program, and it works.
Our program is at Shady Grove Elementary and at the Emmanuel Center downtown. We have two. The scores, the vocabulary scores, the reading fluency scores go up 10 and 20% after 1 year. So it's a huge thing. And besides that, you get to form a relationship with a young person who needs you. So, Jim, we're grateful to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.